Update, brought to you by Simcox Advocates, advising businesses and families since 1949. Visit simcox.com or call 690 300. Manx Radio's Update with Andy Wint.
Faster, my good evening. It's 5:30. This is Update for Wednesday, 24th of May, 2023 from Manx Radio. 30 minutes to look at the latest news on the Isle of Man. Background to that news and sport and business and Sea Watch and travel updates. And the newsmakers in person this evening. Guilty of murder, sentenced tomorrow. Extra safety for this year's TT, says the clerk of the course. Arbory school congestion continues. Training needed for renewables installation. And Manx Rainforest Rangers wanted.
Man Benham for all your business and legal needs.
First of all, at 29 minutes ahead of 6 o'clock, the Update News headlines. Fastamai Christian Jones.
Fastamai. The island's former chief constable has described the verdict in a murder retrial today as utterly right. At Douglas Courthouse this afternoon, Ian Anthony Anderson was found guilty of murdering his wife's lover, Neil Edward Roberts, almost a decade ago. He'll be sentenced tomorrow. With global plans in place to phase out petrol and diesel cars over the next decade, charging points have been called into question. But the chair of the Climate Transformation Board insists there is scope for additional terminals for electric vehicles. And residents are being urged to microchip their pets after an island-based vet has revealed they've seen an increase in the number of animals hit by cars in the past 6 months. The practice manager at Arbory called on motorists to pull over if they've had a collision with an animal. In international news, South Wales police have revealed a timeline of events leading to a fatal bike crash in Cardiff which killed 2 teenagers, insisting no police vehicle was on the same road at the time. There's been some scepticism of their account after CCTV footage showed a marked van following the bike shortly before the collision. The UK's Cabinet Office insists it's fully committed to the COVID inquiry after a claim it's not handed over all the messages sent by Boris Johnson it should have. Downing Street promises all relevant material has been submitted. And Raheem Sterling is not in Gareth Southgate's England squad. The manager says it's down to his injury problems. Those are the Update News headlines. Next at 6.
Man Benham. Contact us by phone, video call, email or face-to-face. We're happy to connect with you. Manx Radio Weather with Manx Glass and Glazing.
Goromayed, thank you, Christian. From the Ronaldsway Met Office, there's a strong wind warning in operation for the North Irish Sea. State of sea is slight or moderate. And the weather this evening, dry with some late brightness, partially cloudy after dark. Lowest is 9 through the night. And for Thursday, tomorrow, Chardane, fine, dry and sunny with a moderate northwesterly up to 17 degrees. Dry overnight, minimum 10. And Friday, Chehenya, dry and settled. They were up to 18 degrees and much the same across the bank holiday weekend. Tides on the way out. Low waters 21 minutes past 9. Sunset 29 minutes past 9. High tide 28 minutes before 4 a.m. Sunrise at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. And the morning low tide 12 minutes past 10.
The Manx Glass and Glazing showroom will be closed for TT from the 2nd of June. Reopening on Monday the 12th of June.
Before we hear from Gary Thompson, clerk of the course, about this year's TT, got some breaking news with Manx Radio sports editor Rob Pritchard.
So it has been confirmed that Honda Racing UK rider Nathan Harrison, the Manxman, will not take part in this year's TT races. We have a brief statement that's been given out by Honda Racing UK, and it is as follows. Honda Racing UK team manager Javier Beltran and Nathan Harrison have together made the decision to withdraw his entry to this year's Isle of Man TT races due to the injury sustained as a result of his accident during the opening Superstock race at this year's Northwest 200. It goes on to say the incident caused Nathan to suffer a broken right collarbone, hairline fracture to his left radius, and he was knocked unconscious. Due to his concussion, surgery could not take place until Wednesday the 18th of May to repair his collarbone. Despite efforts to speed up his recovery post-surgery, the decision has been made that he is not fit to ride at this year's event given the limited time since his surgery to recover. This decision was made with Nathan's health as a priority and will allow him the necessary time to focus on making a full full recovery. Honda Racing UK will now compete at this year's event as a single entry team with rider John McGuinness.
Clark of the TT course says organisers have absolutely taken steps to improve the safety of the racing fortnight after some criticism around that and disruption to schedules last year. Gary Thompson explains some of the extra measures being put in place this time round.
Particularly where the sidecars are concerned, as an extra form of identification, all sidecar drivers now have to wear elasticated armbands as another form of identification. There's going to be spot checks for all competitors in the assembly area before they go up onto the start line, before any practice qualification session or race, and that'll be a check of ID tags. In addition to that, they now need to wear identification sewn into the leathers or attached to the leathers on the inside. Going back to the sidecars, we've had pre-event MOT checks conducted by the technical director and the chief technical officer, and that's a far more stringent technical check of all sidecar outfits prior to the TT event itself. No sidecar outfit will be allowed to sign on until those pre-event MOT checks have taken place.
During the last racing fortnight, you as organisers did come in for some criticism about some aspects of TT. What would you say to those who have maybe had previous concerns?
We're always going to get complaints. Not everybody is a TT fan. We do absolutely everything we can do to minimise disruption, but the TT is the TT. We all know when the TT is. It's not as though the TT has been invented this year. It's been going for 116 years. So everybody knows when the TT is. Obviously, we do have issues with the weather. I always make decisions as early as possible to minimise the disruption to the public, to put the competitors at ease so they know what's going on, and to minimise the amount of time the marshals have to spend out on post. So, we do everything we can in our power to minimise that disruption, but also to importantly put on the show, which is the TT.
A former Castletown resident has been found guilty of murdering his love rival following a fatal fight almost a decade ago. Manx Radio's Tessa Hawley's been at Douglas Courthouse since the start of this and was there today.
Just after 3 p.m. this afternoon, the jury in the trial of Ian Anthony Anderson returned its verdict in the murder case. 11 jurors who have been considering the evidence against the 55-year-old since the 15th of May, unanimous in their deliberations. Guilty. That decision reached 4 hours after they'd been sent out to consider whether Anderson had murdered 60-year-old Neil Edward Roberts in 2013. The gardener from Ballabeg, who was having an affair with Anderson's wife, was found dead at the Andersons' home in the early hours of the 1st of December that year. Before starting their discussions, the jury asked to hear a 999 call made by Anderson for a second time. In it, he's heard telling the operator, "It's not an emergency." They also rewatched CCTV footage from a pub on the 30th of November, showing the men hugging and kissing before they returned to the Queen Street property, where Mr. Roberts was later killed. He sustained more than 70 injuries in the fight which broke out, a fight the prosecutor had described previously as sustained, prolonged, unremitting and extremely violent. Anderson was first convicted of murder in 2015, but had his conviction quashed after it was deemed psychiatric evidence in the case hadn't been properly put. At that stage, he'd received a life sentence with a minimum term of 15 years. Wearing a grey suit and white shirt, Anderson stood silently in the dock today as he was told he'll be sentenced at Douglas Courthouse tomorrow. He's been remanded at the Isle of Man prison until then. Describing the case as complex, Deemster Graham Cook told the jury, "We cannot thank you more for doing your public duty."
Update brought to you by Simcox Advocates, advising businesses and families since 1949. Visit simcox.com or call 690 300.
Plans to ease congestion at Arbory School could be put on hold while the Education Department reviews its estate. It's been hoped that the DESE will be able to create a drop-off area next to the school, but an ongoing review and concerns over whether or not the land should have a protective covenant have slowed progress.
It's not the right thing to do to just fix one problem. We've got to look overall at the whole of our estate, and certainly we've started that in the south of the island, and I feel that we should be investing the public's money in the right places at the right time. And certainly with regards to this, it's the government valuation officer that's given the advice to the department, and I'm certainly not going to go through against the Treasury advice with regards to the land, and that there's to be no covenants in it.
The member for that neck of the woods, if I can put it that way, has been raising these issues for a couple of years now. Yeah. Jason Morehouse. Morehouse, you're standing up on the floor of the House of Keys raising this question. You're being told by the Education Minister, who's just standing there, that you can't answer this, etc. Surely if you two got together in private, she'd be able to give you a lot more information. She's standing there. Would you be prepared to get together with the member and talk perhaps in private about things that you can't say in public?
Well, certainly, anything that I've said today, it's there in the public domain. But
there's some details Mr. Morehouse wants that you could tell him.
I'm not fully aware because he hasn't approached me for a meeting with regards to this. It's purely been questions on the floor. A
point the Minister makes is that there'd be no accidents, injuries there. It's just a question of traffic.
It's that degree of what is an accident. There have been children in difficult positions and parents have raised those concerns. And, it's only...
How many parents? Dozens?
3 over the past 3 years.
3 over 3 years? That's not a great deal. There's a lot of...
Well, when there's an accident, a close accident, it's a serious matter that needs to be looked at. And, it's something I've raised repeatedly. It's only a small issue. It can be sorted, and that's the bottom line.
An advisor on the Isle of Man's Climate Change Transformation Board says the island needs to train more people to install renewable energy sources. Plans are in place to decarbonise the Isle of Man's electricity supply by 2030 and phase out fossil fuel boilers. However, there are questions over how low carbon heat sources such as solar panels and heat pumps will be introduced into the Isle of Man's housing stock. Dave Sowden says the government is looking at a range of incentives.
Yesterday morning I had a meeting with Construction Isle of Man, or representatives from Construction Isle of Man. I won't name names, but large contractors, and particularly those involved in rolling out low carbon heating. And I think one thing that is faced probably everywhere, the UK has the same problem, is that there is at the moment not enough trained installers, particularly in low carbon applications of heating and heat pumps in particular. And there are a lot of initiatives in the pipeline to solve that. And for example, what the Isle of Man government has under consideration right now is options for considering whether in the short term we should continue to do what we've been doing for some years, which is sending installers over to the UK to get trained on things like solar and heat pumps, or whether we are now at the stage where on-island training facilities might be justified. And in fact, an acquaintance of mine came over and he's met with the is it the Department for Education? Met with Desk yesterday to write down in the details of what sort of training facilities might be required for heat pumps and solar PV, where they might be located, how much floor space is needed, what kind of access is needed to get rigs in to train installers. The same gentleman has made exactly that happen over in Jersey. So now Jersey has on-island training facilities in tech colleges with experienced trainers from the UK, not just going over to Jersey to do the training, but training trainers on Jersey itself. So we're exploring whether that model can be copied for the Isle of Man.
Sea Watch with the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company.
Motorship Ben McCree departed Heysham at 22 minutes past 2. She'll be into Douglas in the next 15 minutes or so, departing this evening at 7:45, arriving in Heysham at 11:30 tonight. Overnight departure 2:15 from Heysham back to Douglas at 6 o'clock. Manannan, the high-speed craft, departed Douglas at 8 minutes before 3. She's in Liverpool now on the link span by the pierhead, departing there 7:15 this evening, back to Douglas at 10. Tomorrow morning's departures: Manannan departs Douglas at 7:30 for Liverpool. Ben McCree departs 8 o'clock for Heysham.
Follow the Steam Packet on Twitter for the latest sailing information.
The Manx Wildlife Trust is looking for volunteer Rainforest Rangers to help create the Isle of Man's largest ever native woodland. A 105-acre site at Craigaccowan, East Baldwin, has been chosen as part of a collaboration with other trusts to restore Celtic rainforests across Western Britain and the Isle of Man. Lucy Chapman is the Manx Wildlife Trust Wilder Coordinator.
It's a huge project, over 105 acres, so we'll have lots and lots of volunteers involved over the years that the forest is established. But at the moment, we're looking for a core group of about 10 volunteers who can get down to site regularly. There'll be lots of physical tasks, from tree planting to pond digging, showing people around, doing talks about the site, and they'd be visiting about once a week over a period of time. So they can get in touch with me to start with, so they can drop me an email at lucy@mwt.im or call into the Manx Wildlife Trust offices. But we're also going to do a walk around of the site on the 25th of May in the evening, starting at 6 o'clock, so that people who want to know more about the site, and it's quite a physically challenging site, so people will have a chance to have a look at that and see whether it's for them, can give me a call and I'll get them registered to come along and have a look around. So it is a really exciting project, and it's a very interesting partnership with Aviva, who are funding the project, which is going to be happening around the British Isles, in that it's a 100-year project, so it's really long-sighted. The first year will be spent really getting to know the site with the volunteers, doing some planning and putting in the groundwork. But we're really seeing over the next 10 years there'll be a lot of activity, working over different parts of the site on particular projects. But we're thinking very, very long term with this, and people will be able to see, throughout their lifetime and then their children's lifetimes, the benefits of the work that we put in.
Manx Radio Business Briefing.
And talking of Aviva involved in that rainforest initiative, the Swedish activist investor Kevian Capital has reportedly sold all of its stake in the insurer Aviva. Reuters cited a spokesperson for the company as saying Kevian's position's fallen from more than 150 million shares at the peak in October last year to about 60,000 now. According to the FT, Kevian said Aviva has been transformed from a poorly performing conglomerate to a focused and well-performing insurance company. And for a full daily market report, go to ramseycrookall.com. The UK is set to win a battle with Spain to host a multi-billion-pound electric car battery plant in Somerset. The BBC is reporting that the boss of Tata, the owner of JLR, Jaguar Land Rover, is expected to be in London next week to finalise the deal. It could be the battery plant is the most significant investment in UK automotive since Nissan went to Washington Tyne and Wear in the 1980s under Margaret Thatcher. Tata's chairman is scheduled to meet the UK Prime Minister Sunak mid-next week, although the deal's yet to be signed. Engagements move from negotiation to drafting and choreography of how the landmark agreement will be presented. Up to 9,000 jobs will be created at the Bridgewater site, which is right by the M5 motorway. The UK government's acknowledged the urgent need for electrical vehicle battery manufacturing in the UK to secure the future of the car industry, which employs up to 800,000 people directly and throughout the supply chain.
The Stock Market Report, brought to you by Ramsey Crookall.
UK and European markets closed lower. The dollar held near a 2-month high. Oil rose and gold edged lower. The numbers from Ramsey Crookall at the close in London. FTSE 100 down 1 3/4% at 7,627. The DAX in Frankfurt down just over 2% at the close, 15,825. A short time ago in New York City, the indices were like this. The Dow Jones Industrial is down almost 0.7% at 33,842. The Nasdaq Tech Stocks Index down 0.8% at 12,461. In Chicago, the S&P 500 down 0.7% at 4,116. In the exchange markets, the British pound sterling trading at $1 23.6 cents, €1 14.9 cents, and 23 South African rand 77.3 cents. In commodities, gold's down 0.4% currently at $1,967 per troy ounce, and a barrel of Brent crude up 0.5% at $77.97.
You've got an investment plan?
Yeah, Mike set it up.
But don't you need loads of money to do that?
Not this one. It's called Shearwater from Ramsey Crookall, and you pay in monthly as little as £100. So it's like saving regularly, really helping us invest in the future for a house or the kids' education.
£100 a month? I could easily do that.
You should. The sooner you start, the better.
Invest in your future with as little as £100 a month. Shearwater from Ramsey Crookall, the island's investment specialist for 75 years. Call 717171 or visit ramseycrookall.com. Licensed and regulated by the Isle of Man Financial Services Authority.
The Isle of Man in 30 minutes. Update on Manx Radio with Andy Wint.
Residents are being urged to microchip and tag pets after an island-based vet's revealed they've seen an increase in the number of animals hit by cars in the past 6 months. Practice manager at Arbory Veterinary Practice is Ryan Hagedorn.
There has been an increase in the number of dead cats brought to us. A lot of them without tags and chips, which makes it very difficult for us to identify who owns that particular cat. But what we tend to do is we'll put something out on our Facebook page describing the cat, saying it's got no chip or it's got no identification tag. If you think it's yours, could you pop in and maybe identify it? Probably within the last 6 months, probably about 10 deceased animals maybe that have been found at maybe the beside of the road where someone's brought them in. But yeah, it's really sad to see. It's not nice to see. If you're a driver and you accidentally hit a cat, a dog or anything at all, if you can make sure you pull up if it's safe to do so in the first instance, and if it's during daytime hours where any veterinary practice on the Isle of Man, it doesn't have to be Arbory, it can be anywhere at all. If that veterinary practice is open during daytime hours, if you could bring the animal into your local veterinary practice. If it's out of hours, I would suggest that you kept hold of the animal till the following day. What I would suggest, if you had a towel in the car, or this might sound awful, but a plastic bag, if you could wrap it in a plastic bag, wrap it in a towel, that's probably the best thing to do. I'm of the opinion that all animals should be microchipped. It makes things a lot easier, especially in instances like this where a member of the public's bringing in a deceased cat or a deceased dog which has got no chip. It's very difficult to identify who owns that animal.
Manx Radio Sport.
Faster by Rob Pritchard.
Faster by, good evening. Starting with motorsport, and Dafabet Racing has announced rider Gary Johnson will not be able to compete for them at this year's TT. The team says Johnson was involved in an accident whilst racing in the Czech Republic at the weekend and was subsequently injured. Dafabet Racing is wishing two-time TT winner Johnson a speedy recovery. In cycling, and disappointment today for Mark Cavendish as he wasn't able to make his mark on stage 17 of the Giro d'Italia today. On the largely flat 195km route today, Cavendish kept himself in contention in a huge sprint to the finish, but wasn't able to eke out a podium spot and finished 19th in the leading bunch. It'll be back to a more mountainous section tomorrow for stage 18, covering 161km from Odezzo to Val d'Isoldo. In football, and the final league game of the Manx season took place last night with a 7-goal thriller at Glencrutchery Road in the Canada Life Men's Premier League. St George's hosted Corinthians, and after an end-to-end battle between the sides, it was second-place Corinthians who narrowly edged the contest 4-3. Turning to this evening, it's the penultimate cup final of the season tonight, with the island's top two combi sides set to go head-to-head for the Ascot Hotel Junior Cup. Russian United will take on St John's. On paper at least, Russian come in as favourites, having recorded a perfect title-winning league campaign in Canada Life Combination 1, winning all 22 games to lift the title. But the Spaniards come up against a St John's side who, after a return to the combi top flight this season, managed an impressive second-place finish behind the southern side. The Junior Cup final is set to take place at the Bowl this evening at 6:45pm. And finally, it's been confirmed who will represent the Isle of Man in the triathlon competitions at this year's Island Games in Guernsey. There will be 11 individuals making up the squad. 9 athletes form the standard distance team. They are Alison King, Caitlin Gelder, Chris Hewson, John Barrett, Kristen King, Charlie Swales, Corin Leeming, Will Draper and Matt Looker. Also heading over as additional members of the team will be Ciara Prentice and team coach Dewan Kinley.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Got some delays inbound at Ronaldsway. The 5:25 Loganair from Manchester won't be in till about 6:10. The 10:08 Loganair from London City's on time, but the 5:08 Loganair returning patient transfer from Liverpool won't be in until 9:15. And the last inbound tonight, the scheduled inbound, the 9:25 EasyJet from London Gatwick. Outbound, well, that's 6 o'clock Loganair to Liverpool, patient reservation transfer outbounds delayed till 7 o'clock, and the last outbound tonight, the 9 o'clock or the 9:05 EasyJet to London Gatwick. On the roads, Groudle Road in Onkens, closed between Church Road and Fairway, closed for gas work. In Groudle itself, temporary lights on King Edward Road between Groudle and the Liverpool Arms. They're doing some drainage work. Temporary closures around East Quay. Peel still continue. Delays in Port Erin on that four-way traffic signal by Ballafesson Road for new pedestrian crossing. By the football club in Glen Road, Laxey, we've got some lights there. The Sulby Strait has got lights in Sulby for resurfacing. Ballymena Road, Jerby's got phase closures for water main replacement, and still got those temporary lights on the TT course between Glenduff and Glen Alden. They're working on the pavements.
Quayside Tyres and Service Centre. Spread your payments interest-free. Get more with
Quayside.
Update. Brought to you by Simcox Advocates.
The Treasury Minister steered the sanctions bill through House of Keys this week. The bill aims to provide a modern and flexible legislative framework to allow Manx authorities to implement UK sanctions in a timely manner. Dr. Allenson explains why the bill's been introduced.
What we're doing at the moment is looking, in a world post-Brexit, as the UK change all their regulations and legislation to be far more autonomous, how we can align with them in terms of sanctions, often which are brought in internationally through either the EU or normally from the United Nations, and how we can do that in a more efficient way, because at the moment the situation is a bit clunky with the legislation coming through. We're living in a very rapidly evolving world where sanctions have been needed to be brought in quite quickly, and we've seen that particularly with Russia and Belarus, and so this will hopefully streamline that process while still retaining parliamentary scrutiny and allow officers working in the Treasury to concentrate more on the enforcement of sanctions rather than running around trying to get the regulations up to date.
Bearing in mind the considerable power the bill gives to Tynwald to impose sanctions, was the Minister surprised at the relatively easy ride the bill received in the House of Keys?
We had a public consultation about this and put that out to industry and to members of the general public. There were some very interesting comments made there, and we did adjust the bill according to that. I think a lot of people accept the need for sanctions, accept the need for them to be brought in really quite quickly, and appreciate that by simplifying the process under this bill we can achieve that. But certainly from a Treasury perspective, we're more than happy to take submissions from industry, from members of the public, as we develop this process further, as we bring through the regulations and secondary legislation to make sure we get it right for our island.
That's it for Update tonight. Brought to you from the resources of Manx Radio's news department. Thanks to newsreader Christian Jones, producer Rhiann Evans. I'm Andy Wint. Well, no Nathan Harrison, no Gary Johnson, but the best biking station in the world gets underway from this Friday, AM 1368, smart devices, and on DAB around Douglas and Onken. That's it. Back tomorrow, 5:30.